My name is Sarah Matthews, and I am 29 years old. 6 weeks before my wedding, my mother called while I was coordinating emergency supplies for 3 wildfire evacuation centers outside Seattle. She did not ask whether I was safe or whether the wedding preparations were finished. She simply said, "Your wedding can wait. Your sister's engagement party is more important right now." Before I could respond, my father took the phone. "Your wedding is just a party," he said. "Don't be selfish." For most of my life, those words would have worked. I would have apologized, rearranged everything, and pretended it was my decision. This time, I stared at the evacuation map glowing across my computer and felt something inside me become completely still. "I get it," I whispered, then hung up. They assumed I meant I accepted their decision. What I meant was that I finally understood mine. 5 hours later, my mother had left 11 voicemails. In the first, she demanded that I call her. By the fourth, she sounded frightened. In the last one, she was screaming so loudly that her voice cracked. My fiancé listened without interrupting. When the recording ended, he turned his laptop toward me and smiled. A search page filled the screen. "They Googled my name," he said. Until then, my parents had treated him like an ordinary man lucky to marry into their family. They had no idea who he really was, what company he controlled, or why my father had spent 8 months trying to secure a meeting with him. They were about to learn that postponing my wedding was the smallest mistake they had made. Before I tell you what he revealed, and why my mother was screaming 5 hours later, tell me, what time is it where you are, and where are you watching from? I want to see how far this story travels. My family's favoritism had never been hidden. It had simply been explained so often that everyone expected me to accept it as normal. My younger sister, Victoria Whitmore, was described as sensitive, gifted, ambitious, and destined for extraordinary things. I was described as dependable. Dependable sounded like praise until I understood what my family meant. It meant I could be disappointed without causing trouble. It meant I could pay my own college tuition while my parents funded Victoria's private design program in Los Angeles. It meant I could spend Christmas morning repairing a burst pipe in their basement while Victoria filmed sponsored holiday content upstairs. When our grandmother left us equal inheritances, my parents persuaded me to lend mine to my father's struggling construction consultancy. Victoria used hers to launch a lifestyle channel. No one asked her to contribute. "She needs room to build her future," my mother told me. Apparently, my future had always been strong enough to survive without help. I became an emergency logistics coordinator because disasters made more sense than my family. During floods, fires, and winter storms, people stated what they needed: water, medicine, fuel, shelter, transportation. Nobody disguised demands as love or called neglect a family tradition. I could reroute trucks through closed mountain roads, negotiate warehouse access at 3 in the morning, and coordinate volunteers who had never met. Yet one phone call from my mother could still make me feel 12 years old. That evening, I found my fiancé, Elliot Reed, in our kitchen tightening a cabinet handle. He wore faded jeans and the charcoal sweater he always used when working from home. Nothing about him suggested wealth, influence, or the fact that emergency agencies across the country depended on technology his company had created. That was intentional. Elliot had founded Atlas Response Systems after losing his older brother during a hurricane evacuation. Communication systems failed, rescuers received conflicting location data, and help arrived too late. Elliot spent the next decade building a platform that allowed hospitals, emergency teams, transportation companies, and governments to coordinate in real time. Atlas became one of the country's most respected disaster response technology firms, but Elliot avoided interviews and public events. Most articles used an old photograph taken when he was 26, clean-shaven and wearing glasses. At 35, With a beard and years away from publicity, he could sit beside someone without being recognized. My family only knew that he worked in software consulting. They never asked more. My mother once called him pleasant but unambitious. My father asked whether Elliot planned to find a stable career before marrying me. Victoria joked that he dressed like a man who repaired office printers. Elliot laughed. I did not. When I told him about the call, he poured tea and listened before asking, "Do you want to postpone the wedding?" "No." "Change the date?" "No." "Do you still want them there?" That question hurt. I wanted the version of them that never existed, I admitted. The mother who would fasten my dress without checking Victoria's messages. The father who would walk me down the aisle because he was proud, not because people were watching. Elliot placed his hand over mine. Your mother announced what she wanted. That doesn't make it your decision. Victoria had been dating commercial real estate broker Mason Cole for 9 months. 3 weeks earlier, he proposed during a sponsored Napa weekend. The video received 2 million views, and Victoria immediately planned an elaborate engagement experience at a glass venue overlooking Lake Washington, complete with brand partners, photographers, floral installations, and a guest list chosen partly for social reach. Her preferred date was the Saturday before my wedding. That was inconvenient but manageable. Then my mother decided Victoria needed the same event planner, floral supplier, photographer, and relatives already committed to my ceremony. She also wanted my rehearsal dinner moved because Victoria's sponsor demanded exclusive family access that weekend. The conflict had not happened accidentally. Victoria's party had been deliberately built around my wedding. Why? Elliot asked. Because attention is proof of love to Victoria, and my mother has spent her life making sure she never runs out of either. My phone vibrated. My father had written, "Your mother is upset. Call and apologize before this becomes embarrassing." Elliot read it, then asked, "What happens if you don't apologize?" "They escalate." "Then let them." That night, I reviewed every wedding contract. The venue, catering, photography, transportation, and guest accommodations were all paid from accounts my family did not control. For the first time, their disapproval could not cancel my plans. It could only expose them. At 1:13 a.m., my mother sent another message. "We have already started making changes. Don't make this harder than necessary." I read it 3 times, opened my laptop, and created a folder titled Wedding Interference. The following morning, I learned that my mother had not been bluffing. At 8:07, our florist called while I was reviewing wildfire road closures. "Sarah, I wanted to confirm that you approved the reduction." "What reduction?" She explained that my mother had requested the ceremony arch and aisle flowers be transferred to another family event, claiming I wanted something simpler. My mother had signed the email Mother of the Bride and Family Event Coordinator and said I was overwhelmed with work. Attached beneath it was Victoria's engagement order, almost identical to mine. The same white orchids, suspended greenery, candle arrangement, and entry installation. Victoria was not merely trying to dominate the weekend. She planned to copy my wedding design and show it online first. I secured the florist account with a password and requested every message. By noon, the hotel managing our guest block called because someone claiming to represent my family had tried to relocate 6 relatives closer to Victoria's venue. At 2, our photographer forwarded an offer from Victoria, promising extra money if he left my rehearsal dinner early to cover her cocktail reception. At 4, my aunt sent a revised itinerary. My rehearsal was labeled Optional Sarah Activity. Victoria's engagement brunch was marked Primary Family Celebration. I did not cry. I documented. Emergency work had taught me that when systems failed, assumptions were useless. You needed names, timestamps, instructions, and the moment a preventable problem became a crisis. By evening, my folder held 17 screenshots, 4 emails, 2 voicemails, and the revised itinerary. Elliot found me at the dining table surrounded by documents. You look like you're preparing a federal case. I'm preparing for my mother to deny everything. He picked up the itinerary. Optional Sarah activity? My father wrote it. He uses Calibri and underlines whatever he considers important. Elliot sat beside me, but he was no longer amused. Your father's company contacted Atlas again today. Whitmore Civic Development was my father's consulting firm, advising builders pursuing municipal infrastructure projects. For a year, he had chased a partnership with a technology provider because new city contracts increasingly required real-time emergency coordination systems. He spoke constantly about the opportunity but never named the company. He has submitted 3 proposals to Atlas, Elliot said. My stomach tightened. Does he know you founded it? No. The proposals went through our partnerships division. Were you considering him? His company has useful experience, but reviewers noted concerns about billing practices and staff turnover. I pushed the papers away. I don't want our family conflict affecting your business. It won't, but their behavior may reveal how they operate when they believe the person in front of them has no power. I hated that he was right. My parents had ignored Elliot because they believed he could offer them nothing. They interrupted him, mocked his career, and once moved him to the end of a charity dinner table so a wealthy developer could sit beside Victoria. They judged people by usefulness. They had simply miscalculated his. That evening, my mother texted, "Family meeting tomorrow at 5. No excuses. Bring Elliot if he insists on being involved." I almost declined, but my aunt called and said my mother had told relatives I was suffering an emotional breakdown from wedding pressure. She said Victoria tried to simplify things, but you became territorial, my aunt explained. Did she mention contacting my vendors? No. Or moving hotel reservations? No. Then tomorrow they can explain everything in front of witnesses. After the call, I asked Elliot to attend but not reveal who he was. I need to hear what they say while they still believe you don't matter. He studied me, then nodded. That sounds like an emergency coordinator talking. I'm finished walking into family disasters without a map. I told my mother we would attend. She replied immediately, "Good. Victoria has been under terrible stress because of you." I thought about all the years I had moved my chair so my sister could occupy the center of every photograph. This time, my chair belonged to a table I had built myself, and nobody was moving it. My parents held the meeting at my mother's event design studio, a converted warehouse where she created installations for corporate galas. The conference room had been arranged like a business presentation. Bottled water sat at every seat. An agenda rested before my father, and fabric samples lay beside my mother as though we were choosing colors rather than discussing her attempt to dismantle my wedding. Victoria was already there in a cream cashmere dress, her phone face down and her makeup arranged to make her swollen eyes look natural. Mason sat beside her, visibly uneasy. My father pointed to 2 chairs. "Sit down. We need to resolve this before Sarah damages the family. Not before they damaged me, before I damaged them by refusing to cooperate." Victoria's engagement creates a valuable opportunity, he began. Her partnerships provide exposure for your mother's studio and perhaps my firm. Sarah's wedding is private and does not create the same broader value. I stared at him. Did you just rank our celebrations by marketing exposure? That emotional reaction is exactly what we're trying to avoid. Victoria sighed. Nobody is saying your wedding doesn't matter. You labeled my rehearsal optional. Dad did that. My father called the itinerary practical. My mother leaned toward me. Victoria's sponsors have fixed dates. Your ceremony is flexible. My venue has been reserved for 11 months. The people who love you would understand if you moved it. Would Victoria move her party? Silence filled the room. That is different, Victoria said. Why? Because contracts are attached to it? So are mine. Yours are personal. Mine affect my business. There it was. My wedding was personal, therefore disposable. Victoria's event generated money, therefore sacred. I placed the florist email, hotel request, photographer's message, and revised itinerary on the table. Let's discuss business. My mother's face tightened. You had no authority to contact my vendors, I said. I was making the weekend work. You claimed I authorized you. You were unavailable. I was helping evacuate families from wildfires. And Victoria was panicking. Even Mason looked down at the absurd comparison. My father tapped the table. Your mother was helping. She impersonated my representative. Don't use dramatic language. It is accurate language. Victoria shoved back her chair. Sarah has always resented me. I turned to her. I don't resent you for being loved. I resent that you require everyone else to become smaller so you can feel important. You copied my flowers, tried to take my photographer, and moved relatives from my hotel. None of that was necessary. Tears filled her eyes, and my mother immediately took her hand. Look what you're doing to her. That sentence carried me through 2 decades. Victoria crying after taking my graduation dress, crashing my car, or expecting me to finish her assignments. Her tears had always been treated as evidence of my guilt. This time, I asked one question. Did you offer my photographer extra money to abandon my rehearsal? It was a scheduling discussion. Did you know he was contracted to me? She looked toward our father. Mason spoke quietly. Answer her. Victoria stared at him. Why are you taking her side? I'm asking whether it's true. She folded her arms, answering without words. Mason moved his chair away. My mother panicked. This is why we wanted privacy. Elliot, perhaps you don't understand how close families operate. Sometimes one person must compromise. Elliot remained calm. Which person? She blinked. Excuse me? Which person is always asked to compromise? That is unfair. Then name one significant thing Victoria surrendered for Sarah. My father's face reddened. You're not married to her yet. This is a family discussion. I am the person marrying her. Your attempt to interfere concerns me. My father gave him the same dismissive smile he used on junior employees. Marriage requires more than supporting Sarah's emotional reactions. It requires stability and the ability to provide. My mother added, We've had concerns about your career. What concerns? Elliot asked. You call yourself a technology consultant, she said. That can mean anything. Victoria lifted her chin. I searched for you. There is no meaningful professional profile, no company page, barely any social media. For someone marrying into this family, that is strange. My father opened a folder and offered a deal. Delay the wedding 6 months, evaluate whether Elliot was financially realistic, and they would help pay for a new ceremony. You never offered to pay for this one, I said. Because you rushed without consulting us. I have been engaged 14 months. My mother's voice sharpened. Why are you determined to make us enemies? I placed one final page on the table, a transcript of a voicemail my mother accidentally left recording after believing she had ended a call. Victoria's voice came first. If Sarah refuses to move, tell the relatives she's unstable. Nobody wants to travel for a bride having a breakdown. Then my mother replied, We only need enough people to cancel that the venue looks embarrassing. She'll postpone when she realizes half the family won't attend. The room froze. Victoria stopped crying. Mason stood. Is that real? Victoria grabbed his wrist. Sit down. He pulled away. My father reached for the page, but I removed it. You were not coordinating 2 celebrations. You were sabotaging mine. My mother stared at the transcript. It was taken out of context. Elliot's eyes hardened. What context makes it acceptable? My father began gathering his papers. This meeting is over. The meeting you planned is over, I said. Mine is beginning. I informed them that all vendor accounts were secured, every relative would receive corrected information, and further interference would be documented by an attorney. My mother looked horrified. You would threaten your own family? I am explaining that impersonation and contract interference have consequences. Victoria laughed. She thinks she's powerful because her boyfriend found a lawyer. Elliot looked at her calmly. They Googled the wrong Elliot Reed. My father's expression changed first, not from recognition, but calculation. What does that mean? Elliot opened a page on his phone and set it on the table. The Atlas Response Systems leadership page showed an older photograph of him beside a mobile command vehicle, clean-shaven and wearing glasses. Underneath were the words, Elliot Reed, founder and executive chairman. Victoria immediately searched on her own phone. My mother looked at my father. Atlas Response Systems? He did not answer. The color had disappeared from his face. Atlas was not a celebrity company, but within emergency management, hospital coordination, government contracting, and infrastructure, it was enormous. Its technology operated across 37 states, and its private valuation exceeded $4 billion. More importantly to my father, Atlas was selecting regional partners for a national infrastructure program. Whitmore Civic Development had applied 3 times. You're that Elliot Reed? My father whispered. The one whose career your family considered meaningless. My mother recovered quickly. Why didn't you tell us? You never asked, Elliot replied. You asked whether I had a real job. You asked Sarah whether I earned enough for a mortgage. You asked me to move my car because you assumed I was a delivery driver. You never asked what I built or why the work mattered. My father focused on his proposal. Did you know my company applied? I learned yesterday. He looked at me suspiciously. Sarah knew? Not until yesterday. My mother's attitude transformed instantly. 10 minutes earlier, Elliot was an unstable choice. Now she smiled at him. Perhaps we were overly protective. Parents worry. Sarah has always been independent, and sometimes we forget how strongly she reacts. I stared at her. She was blaming my sensitivity while trying to impress the man she had insulted. Victoria laughed bitterly. So, this was a test? You let us sit here without telling us who he was? I allowed you to show how you treat someone when you believe he has nothing to offer, I said. My father called that manipulative. Elliot shook his head. I use my legal name. I value privacy. Your lack of curiosity is not deception. Mason remained by the door. Would knowing his identity have changed how you treated him? He asked Victoria. She did not answer. My father attempted to separate business from family. Elliot agreed. Relief crossed my father's face until Elliot added, That is why I will not interfere with the independent review of your company. My father exhaled. However, the review team requested information about leadership ethics and contract conduct. Sarah's evidence raises legitimate concerns. You would submit private family emails? My father demanded. I don't need to. Your proposal already contains misleading claims about family access to regional decision-makers. It implies Sarah's emergency management relationships can support your contracts. I turned to my father. You used my professional network without permission? It was a general reference. We are family. No, you are a consultant who listed my public service relationships as a commercial asset. Elliot opened another page. Your proposal also describes Whitmore Civic Development as a family-led organization built on transparency and accountability. I laughed once. My mother stood. This has gone far enough. We came to solve a wedding problem, not destroy Gregory's business. You were prepared to destroy my wedding. That is different. His business supports employees. My wedding represents my family, too. She looked toward Elliot. People say things under stress. I understand stress, he replied. I also understand patterns. Victoria accused me of hating her success. I reminded her that I had organized her first brand events, recovered missing inventory, and lent her $18,000 to launch her studio. She had repaid only $2,500. Mason looked stunned because Victoria had told him our parents funded everything. Sarah is humiliating me before my engagement party, she cried. No, I am telling the truth because all of you built your plans around my silence. My father stood. We are leaving. Before he reached the door, Elliot said, Your Atlas review meeting was scheduled for Tuesday. It has been canceled. My father stopped. The compliance team found inconsistencies before tonight. Unauthorized use of Sarah's affiliations confirmed the need for formal review. You said you would stay separate. I did. The compliance department made the decision. My father stared at me with fury. You did this. I did not write your proposal, misrepresent access, or teach you to value people according to what they could give you. Then, every phone on the table began vibrating. Victoria checked hers and went pale. Mason had sent the voicemail transcript to his parents, the people financing the engagement party. The consequences arrived as a series of doors closing. Mason's parents withdrew their contribution that night. They did not object to an elaborate engagement celebration. They objected to funding an event constructed by sabotaging my wedding. The botanical venue required another payment by noon, and Victoria could not cover it alone. My mother offered to use her studio's business credit, but my father refused because his firm's accounts had been temporarily restricted during an internal audit triggered by the Atlas Compliance Review. The audit was not Elliot's revenge. It resulted from financial choices my father had made long before our confrontation. By morning, 2 sponsors had withdrawn from Victoria's party. One was a stationery company that had seen proof she tried to redirect my vendors. Another was a family-oriented home brand unwilling to appear in what its representative called an unresolved ethical dispute. Victoria posted a video about jealous relatives sabotaging women during important milestones. For 20 minutes, people believed her. Then Mason ended their engagement. He did it privately, but Victoria announced it publicly, claiming he had failed to defend her from a toxic family member. Mason responded with one sentence. I ended the engagement after learning that the celebration was organized through deception and deliberate harm to another person. His statement spread faster than anything Victoria had posted. My voicemail filled with apologies, gossip, and sudden concern from relatives who had ignored me for years. I answered almost none of them. My mother called 34 times. My father sent 3 emails. The first accused me of destroying the family. The second demanded that Elliot restore the partnership review. The third offered a compromise. If Elliot reopened the meeting, my parents would attend my wedding and persuade relatives to come. They still believed their presence was valuable enough to purchase my obedience. I forwarded the email to Elliot, who replied from the next room. That may be the least persuasive negotiation I have ever seen. 2 days later, my mother arrived without warning. She pushed past me when I opened the apartment door. You need to fix this. No greeting, no apology. What exactly? I asked. Victoria lost her engagement. Her sponsors are leaving. Your father's company may lose its biggest opportunity. Relatives refuse to speak to us. She turned to Elliot. You have made your point. I have made no public statement, he replied. You canceled Gregory's meeting. The compliance department canceled it. You own the company. I also employ people responsible for preventing unethical partnerships. She looked back at me. Tell him to stop. Did you come here to apologize? I came because this has gone too far. That is not an apology. Your sister's life is collapsing. My wedding was 6 weeks away when you tried to empty it. You always do this, she said. You keep records and repeat exact words until everyone feels like a criminal. Exact words are inconvenient when people want to rewrite history. Finally, she admitted that she feared Victoria's moment would disappear. She needs attention in a way you don't, my mother said. So you punished me because I appeared strong enough to survive it. She sat down. When you were young, Victoria was anxious. She needed reassurance. You were capable. Teachers praised you. You knew what you wanted. So you decided I needed nothing. I thought you understood. I understood that love went to whoever created the largest emergency. She glanced at Elliot. Now you have someone powerful protecting you. No, I have someone who respects me. It feels powerful because you never did. Her eyes filled with tears, but I did not rush to comfort her. I am your mother, she whispered. Yes. How can you exclude me from the wedding? The same way you tried to exclude my wedding from the family. I made a mistake. You made a plan. You contacted vendors, moved guests, recruited relatives, and prepared lies about my mental health. She asked what I wanted. I required a written correction to every relative she misled, an acknowledgement that I did not cause Victoria's breakup or my father's audit, and a promise that both parents would stay away from the wedding. People will talk, she said. They already are. I will look like a terrible mother. Is that your greatest concern? At the door, she accused me of enjoying her suffering and believing I was superior because I was marrying a wealthy man. I agreed to marry Elliot before I knew the value of his company. You dismissed him because you assumed he had no money. Which of us measures people by wealth? She had no answer. 3 days later, she sent a written correction admitting that I had not authorized any wedding changes and that claims about my emotional condition were false. My father never apologized. Instead, he contacted the Atlas board chairman, who forwarded his message to compliance. Whitmore Civic Development was removed from partnership consideration. A week before Victoria's canceled engagement party, my parents organized a smaller family dinner at my mother's studio. They set the table for 30 people. Only 6 arrived. Someone sent me a photograph of my parents and Victoria surrounded by empty chairs beneath flowers originally copied from my wedding. For a moment, I felt satisfaction. Then I recognized the deeper truth. They had created the exact scene they intended for me, a celebration emptied by their own choices. I had not sabotaged it. I had simply stopped protecting them from consequences. On my wedding morning, my mother left one final voicemail. I understand we are not invited, she said. I hope someday you remember that families are supposed to forgive. I listened once and deleted it. Forgiveness, I had learned, was not the same as renewed access. Elliot and I married in a restored ferry terminal overlooking Puget Sound. We chose it because its original purpose had been movement, carrying people from one shore to another. That felt right. We reduced the guest list from 160 to 84. The smaller room did not feel empty. It felt honest. My aunt helped fasten my dress, coworkers brought coffee before sunrise, and the florist rebuilt the ceremony installation using cedar, white anemones, and storm-fallen maple collected near our first apartment. Nothing belonged to Victoria's canceled event. Nothing was designed for an audience online. When I reached the aisle, I walked alone, not because nobody loved me enough to accompany me, but because I wanted those first steps to belong entirely to me. Elliot waited near the windows. He did not look like a billionaire, founder, or the man whose name had terrified my parents after one search. He looked like the person who had sat across from me in our kitchen and asked what I wanted, before telling me what I should do. During his vows, he said, I will never require you to become smaller to prove you love me. That was when I cried. After the ceremony, nobody asked why my parents were absent. The people who mattered knew, and the others understood that a wedding was not a courtroom where the bride had to defend every empty chair. Months later, my father's company survived its audit but lost several contracts. Investigators found no criminal fraud, but they identified inaccurate representations and weak financial controls. He was forced to restructure the firm and leave proposal oversight. My mother's studio remained open, though several clients left after learning she had used business resources to interfere with my wedding. Victoria disappeared from social media for 4 months. When she returned, her content was smaller and quieter. She never apologized directly. On my birthday, she sent one message. I didn't realize how much everyone protected me from consequences. I read it without replying. Perhaps it was the beginning of self-awareness. Perhaps it was another attempt to reopen a door without acknowledging the damage. Either way, I was no longer responsible for completing her growth. My parents remain outside my life. That could change one day, but reconciliation will require more than tears, promises, and speeches about family unity. It will require accountability, changed behavior, and respect for boundaries they once treated as insults. The greatest lesson I learned was that self-respect is not revenge. Revenge would have meant using Elliot's authority to destroy my father's company, publicly humiliating Victoria, or turning my wedding into a performance designed to prove I had won. I did none of those things. I told the truth, protected what belonged to me, and allowed adults to experience the results of their own choices. Toxic families often call that cruelty because they are accustomed to one person absorbing every consequence. For years, I believed being dependable meant carrying whatever my family dropped: debts, emergencies, lies, disappointments, and shame. I thought strength was measured by how much pain I could hide without inconveniencing anyone. I was wrong. Real strength is knowing when to put the weight down. Useful education does not come only from schools or books. Some of the most important knowledge comes from recognizing unhealthy patterns, learning emotional boundaries, and understanding that love without respect becomes control. My mother chose Victoria's engagement over my wedding because she believed I would eventually surrender. My father called my wedding just a party because he believed his approval determined its value. They Googled my husband and discovered they had misjudged him. But their greater mistake happened long before that. They had misjudged me. They believed I would always move my chair so someone else could take the center. On my wedding day, surrounded by people who never required me to disappear in order to belong, I realized I did not need a better place at my parents' table. I needed the courage to leave it. Have you ever been called selfish simply because you stopped accepting unfair treatment? Share your story in the comments. Your experience may give someone else the knowledge and courage to draw a boundary of their own.
We appreciate every viewer who followed this story from beginning to end. This video is completely fictional and made only for educational entertainment and reflection. We hope the final message stays with you. After betrayal, disappointment, or unfair treatment, you still have the right to protect your heart, rebuild your peace, and create a future where your worth is no longer questioned by the wrong people.